We're less than a month into 2022 at this point, and already the signs are right there that the integrated sports watch trend has not really weakened in the least. Hi everyone, and welcome to Shaluso, and today we're talking about two recent releases that are firmly within the integrated sports watch segment that have really, I think, shown a great deal of progress for both of them. One in a more conservative and evolved way, the other one I think is a big jump, but one that was so necessary and is probably even a few years late. Let's talk about the first one, probably the bigger news, which is the introduction of the new Audemars Piguet Jumbo, the 16202 generation. Now, aesthetically, there's not that much change, and that's also one of the highlights, the fact that this watch is still just as thin, coming in at only about 8 millimeters, as its predecessor. Now, on the face of it, that may not sound too impressive, but then you have to realize that this watch has a new movement, one that actually is thicker than its predecessor. But yet, Audemars Piguet was able to give the same specs of 50 meters water resistance, which admittedly isn't very much, and 8 millimeters of thickness, despite having a thicker movement. So right away, an engineering feat just in the fact that Audemars Piguet was able to put a thicker movement in the same case dimensions and still make everything work and still make it not actually be a thicker watch overall. More importantly though is the fact that they've finally moved away from the JLC-based caliber that it's been using for the better part of about 50 years. And they remind you of those 50 years on the rotor itself. The new caliber 7171 has a custom rotor for the year 2022, celebrating 50 years of the Royal Oak. This brand new movement is much more updated compared to its predecessor. It features more components, it features a higher power reserve, and most importantly, it is of Audemars Piguet's own design. The previous JLC design, while never appearing within a JLC watch, was used at various different times with that sort of architecture by Patek, by Vacheron Constantin, and of course AP. The other big difference to this new generation of Royal Oak is in the shade of blue. Now, it may not sound like a big difference, but they've actually gone through a lot of work to try and replicate that original slightly blacker shade of blue that appeared on the original Royal Oak. And that I think is a nice touch to celebrate the 50 years of the Royal Oak, to bring a relatively unique shade of blue, especially in a market where the standard sort of AP boutique blue has been copied by tons of different homages. So I think it's great that they've brought that back, and it adds a little bit more specialness and differentiation compared to the 15202. Now, the second release is admittedly the one that I'm actually more interested in and more excited about, and that is the new Hublot Big Bang Integral Time Only. And yeah, I have no explanation as to why Hublot thought that time only was a good name for a watch with a date. But beyond that, the more important thing is that first off, this watch is 40 millimeters and only just over 9 millimeters thick with 100 meter water resistance. I think this is an amazing move for Hublot because they're taking what I think is one of the best looking watches in their collection, the Big Bang Integral, making it smaller, more accessible, of course, by not being a chronograph. You shave about $5,000 off of the retail price of the titanium version. It gives Hublot, I think, one of its only really decent value options within the segment that it plays in. That is a time only that doesn't have a cheap as fuck Salida movement in it. One of my biggest gripes with the Classic Fusion line is that while I think it looks great, its proportions are great, the design is good, the finishing I think is relatively acceptable for its price point, the movement lets it down so much. It's a Salida SW300 on the inside. And what Hublot has done is they've done what I've been saying for years that they've had to do, is they've put in the Zenith Elite movement. Now, Hublot is not above using Zenith movements. They use the El Primero in the spirit of Big Bang. And as part of the LVMH group, it makes sense that they use a movement from within the group, and it's a perfectly respectable movement. I have no problem with Hublot using outsourced movements, as long as they're not the same ones that a watch that costs 1/10 of the price would use. In this though, they use the Elite. There are probably plenty of people who will say, well then why don't you just get a Defy Classic? And that's a fair point. But if you want the Hublot look, and also if you want the Hublot finishing, then you kind of have to pay the Hublot tax. But I think this is a much more reasonable offering compared to the, 10-odd thousand US that they charge for a 42 millimeter Classic Fusion. I would rather pay 17 for a Big Bang Integral. I mean, the bracelet is much better finished. The dial has that open work look, which isn't for everyone, but then again, this is Hublot. It's gonna be polarizing. And the shape and proportion is just an amazing execution while still keeping that original Big Bang DNA with the modular looking case. But we do need to address that price. Of course, 17,000 is a bit steep. It'll be interesting to see how this fares. However, my guess is that like most Hublots, they'll probably depreciate a little bit. You won't be paying full retail for something like this, I don't imagine. I personally hope that this is a sign that Hublot will continue to integrate either in-house movements or at least more Zenith movements into their line so that they can refine that value proposition and hopefully without bumping up the price too much. I recently got the chance to film a Classic Fusion Ultra Thin, which was a watch from a few years ago, and I think that retailed at something around like sort of the 15,000 US mark. And that had a proper in-house movement, an 80-hour power reserve, and it was properly thin, like we're talking about as thin as that AP. So that I think showed that Hublot is capable of making some really serious watches and really improving that sort of value proposition that the Classic Fusion and the Valjoux-equipped Big Bangs at a retail level, I think really fuck up for the brand. At a pre-owned level though, nearly all Hublots are great value because of that depreciation. Of course, we live in an industry where everyone thinks that a watch losing value is like a terrible thing. The fact of the matter is that's only terrible for the person who paid full retail. If you're getting it pre-owned, you really have nothing to lose and you get a great watch for the money. And I really hope Hublot rides this wave in terms of just improving their overall offering, as well as maybe slimming down on the 5 billion special editions that they make. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these new releases? Do you think Audemars Piguet did a good job by just doing a very steady evolution of the 16202? Or do you think they should have been a bit more adventurous? And what do you think of this new Big Bang? Do you think it's better value than something like a Classic Fusion proportionately? Or do you think this is just more overpriced Hublot? They're using a better movement, but they're still charging a ton of money. Love to know you guys' thoughts in the comments below. And of course, if you like this video, make sure you like it and share it. If you want to see more pictures and infographics of watches, make sure you follow me on Instagram at Shaluso. If you want to see more videos of watches, then make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell as well so you know when the next video comes out. In any case, thanks for watching this video and we'll catch you on the next one.